This morning, I'm going to be presenting on a topic, YE for beginners, building website with ease. So I would love to share my screen first so you can follow through. Please, can you see my screen?
It started sharing.
All right. So this morning we'll be talking about YE 2 for beginners, build website with ease. In case you are asking what YE framework is, in a very nutshell, YE framework is an extension of PHP, which is a framework that is used to build a very good website. Yes, very robust system. It makes coding easier. So we want to know about this YE framework, YE 2 framework, and how, as beginners, you can decide if you should go for it or not. So today's content will include introduction, history of YE, technologies which YE adopted from, and the performance of YE, then the advantages and disadvantages of YE. And we'll do a simple demonstration of how YE is used to build a website. Now we have conclusion then. Now go straight to the point. What is YE framework? Like I said, it is an extension of PHP framework that is used to create a very nice website. The website is robust. People go for YE because it is very secured. Yes, in terms of security, YE is recommended for everyone. They say YE is pronounced YE or G. That is what it means. It means, yes, it is. That's what it actually means. It is an high performance component-based PHP framework for developing local, large-scale web application. What do we mean by that? If you happen to be a PHP developer and you're looking forward to creating a very robust website, or you want to do things with ease instead of just using the traditional native code of coding PHP, YE framework makes things very easier for you. In just 2 minutes, you get a working website. All you need to do is to customize to your own taste. That is what YE framework does. The YE framework is free open source web application development framework written in PHP 5. And it is built on sophisticated enterprise application in hand, which means prior to the production of YE framework, those developers who put effort to develop this framework, they have in mind its function of trying to solve the problem of creating sophisticated websites, and it supports MVC. MVC means model, view, and controller. That is a very good approach for any software development. You need to follow MVC approach to make your code readable and easier to understand. So that is a brief introduction. What about YE? What is the origin? Well, it is developed by Quenzhou. Yes, he is very experienced in other framework like Prado, and being the fact that Prado is kind of a, let's say, a father to YE, because YE was built with Prado in mind. That is an extension of Prado. We get YE. So he have years of experience, and he started YE project in the year 2008. And by December 2008, he was able to release the first version of YE, which is 1.0. And currently we have YE 2. So that YE 1 is back then, but YE 2 is the one we are using currently now, the most recent. But we are made to understand that its first release was 2008. Now this YE framework was built with some advanced technology in mind, which is Ruby on Rails, meaning that the YE framework have some features which is similar to Ruby on Rails. It inherits its spirit of conversion over configuration. And if you should notice, when you are coding with YE framework, you made mention of active record. This active record, which enables us to be able to code on fly, which means right from your code editor, you can code and it affects both your database and as well as your local class. So active record is one features which Yi provide, and that is made possible because it extends Ruby on Rails. It has something similar to Ruby on Rails. And when you are coding with Yi framework, you don't have to worry about some other nice features like jQuery, because jQuery is integrated in Yi. So if you know jQuery and you're working well with jQuery, you can easily customize your web right from the Yi folder itself. You don't need to download an external jQuery file. And you also need to know that there's other framework which you know that we have a Symfony. These frameworks also are used in developing Yi as well. So what are we saying in essence? What we are saying in essence is that Yi has many technology which it grows from. So we should expect it to provide us with many features. So what next? We have some other promises that Yi offers. Yi does things like MVC design pattern, which means you have to build your classes in a separate folder, all your view files in a separate folder, then your controller, which is used to access each of those view files, and any manipulation is done in the controller. It follows MVC design pattern. And if you are well into programming, you will come to understand that MVC is well recommended for any form of project, because your code which you are writing need to be understood by others. So when someone comes to read your code and he sees the approach, MVC approach, he knows where to locate the view file, he knows where to go for the controller file as well as the model. So it follows MVC approach. It has a very good ingredient when it comes to form input and validation. Yes, with Yi, you can easily validate your form using rules. That is a class, or let's say that is a function in Yi, rules. With it, you can validate your form right from your code editor. And the way it does is that it is very easier. You simply state that this particular box, we can say input, you want it to be having only string. You simply put the name of that input, then you put string. That is a simple validation. It means everything that should be allowed on that input should only be a string, or you can as well do lots of it. So we have authentication and authorization on this Yi. We have error handling, logging of errors, as well. We have security, which means with Yi, you can easily customize security to your own test. Yi have what we call inbuilt security check. And when it comes to maybe capture where you need to ensure that you're not a robot. In case you are browsing, you must have seen such thing where they say you have to verify that you're not a robot. Yes, if you are developing with Yi framework, you don't need to download an external library to incorporate it on your project. You simply use what is in place in Yi. It has detailed documentation. Yi performance, we can say, is highly performable. Yes, it's a very highly performance framework in the sense that compared to other framework within the PHP ecosystem, Yi is excellent when it comes to performance. You can see from this artist impression, you can see Yi, how its performance is beyond compared to Cognita, Zen, Cake, PHP, and it increases. And up till now, though many people doesn't use Yi, most people prefer to use Laravel, but in some developed countries like US, so such framework which is highly recommended is Yi framework. So it has a very good performance compared to other PHP framework. We also know that Yi is fast, but why is it fast? There are some things that makes it very fast because of some things it does. They say it follows a lazy loading approach. Yes, it loads using that approach and it makes it very easier. How does it work is that its class file does not need to access objects until they are needed. So everything is done on the fly. If Yi wants to fetch any code, everything is done, let's say automatic. Everything is done automatic. It's easily fetch those files during runtime. And it doesn't need to be able to fetch it until when it is needed. Before it is needed, it is already fetched in memory. That makes it very, very okay. And it also have benchmark. If you are developing with Yi framework, you'll notice at the downside of your browser, you see what you can use to measure your performance. You can see the speed of a database query. You can as well see how fast it is used, the speed it used to access each page. So you can easily give a very good documentation right from your browser itself, because it has um, 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 some things that can enable you to measure those performance details. And Yi, like I said, follows MVC. Then what is this MVC? I said model view controller. Why is it very important to develop apps with MVC approach? Because it makes your app in order. Yes, it makes your app in order. Before now, before any kind of MVC pattern, we often develop app in such a way that pleases us. You can decide to put your view anywhere. You use your code to manipulate your view, which means in just one page, you can even have a fully functional website, just one page. But having the MVC approach, it enables us to be able to customize our website in such a way that other developers coming in will be able to see that, yes, this is what is being done to develop this site. And we also know that here, okay, the first one is model. Model simply means, when I say class, those classes or objects that is used to develop your website, those classes that represent those entities. For example, now, if you are creating a particular user page, yes, you want a user to be able to log in into your website. Yes, user is an object. All those properties that the user exhibits, yes, we can call it properties under that object. It is the same way of you saying model. So all classes are classified under what we call model, following the MVC approach. So we also know that Yi perform this using form models and active record. I made mention of active record earlier on. Active record is a very advanced object class, which make it possible for you to do a lot of things. With active record, you don't need to write too much of code before you're able to query or do any functionality with your Yi framework. So this active record makes querying data from the database very fast in just simple lines of code. This is done by Yi. I don't think any other, okay, Ruby on Rails also have something like this, but Yi has active record, which is lacking in most of the other language or framework we use today. We also know that, okay, models, we have different forms of models. We have the one that is used to collect data from the user. Yes, I said a model is just a representation of an object in any of your projects. We have a user model. User model should be used to classify all of the users that you are receiving through the form input. Yes, and those properties. So we also have active record. This is another kind of form of model. I made mention of it earlier on. So we also have view. View, anything that is visible with your own eyes is known as view, which means all those beauty you see on your website. For example, now, when you go to the home page, most of those things that appear to your own eyes are the views. Yes. With Yi framework, you have a separate folder where you can put all your views. And when you have them in your views, you can easily access them through the controller with ease. Yes. And we also have, okay, views have layouts. Layouts are used to decorate views. We have some layouts which Yi use. For example, now we have a form layout in Yi, which means when you are using that particular layout, you don't need to write all of the HTML code you know. Using layouts in Yi framework, you don't need to write maybe a form, you want to do form, you now begin to write input. And you begin to write everything you customize all with some layouts. You just need to only put the basic things you need, while all the authentication and as well as the validation is done with the layout in cooperation with the active record class in Yi. So in essence, what I'm trying to say is that Yi framework have a lot of features that makes web development very easy. It becomes like a breeze. The last one under the MVC approach is controller. The controller is the first place that every access will get to before it is being redirected to the appropriate destination. So from the controller, you can access your view. So it translates interaction with the view into actions to be performed. And with Yi, you do all those accessing of views as well as all other things are done with action. For example, now in your controller page, you'll notice that it's divided into different actions. So depending on how the user access the website, if it's coming from the home page or from any access, now this controller file will now see how to redirect the user to the appropriate place using the action. So if you say action index, you define a function called action index in your controller file, which means when the user comes to that action index, any index, if it tries to access the index page, yes, under the controller, it will route to that action index and then fetch the view, which is the index of HTML from the view folder. So MVC approach is very, very nice when it comes to YE framework. You don't have to do lots of the customization because everything is already in place for you. And this same YE framework, I said, with the controller, it supports routing. Yes, it routes with what we call controller ID. And it doesn't mean that you only need one controller. In YE project, you have as many controllers. The essence of controller is to make coding more organized. If you are creating a website and you want to create a controller that will deal with all of users' aspects, maybe user sign up, user checking of profile and other things like that, you can create a controller called user controller. Then you have another one that has to do with maybe the transaction aspects. You can say transaction controller. Now, each of these controller will do a specific task, which makes coding much more easier and readable by other people coming to glance through your code. I said controller has what we call actions. Yes, under the controller file, you say actions and behaviors. The actions will be performed when it receives and request. When a request, when you receive a request, action will be performed. All of them, including the filter. Now, what the filter does is this: the filter will be able to easily decide who is going to this page and who is not going to this page. The filter is the best way for you to say, okay, fine, if you are not logged in as a user, you cannot access this particular page. That is done by the filter. And this is under the controller. This filter is just with a simple line of code, you can redirect every users who are not logged in back to the home page. That is done by the filter. And all of this coexists in the YE framework. All of these are inside the YE framework, which makes it very excellent. Advantages of YE: it is very fast and efficient. Yes, very fast and efficient. It is used with easier authentication, and it follows the MVC approach, but having advantages does not mean that it doesn't have disadvantages. Okay. So the YE framework is very, very excellent when it comes to web development. In conclusion, YE is very, very nice and it provides all features you need. So in case you are considering going for YE, I will recommend it for you to be able to get a project working in no time. Thank you. Any question, please?
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you. The second presenter should come up now. You can stop sharing your screen, Matthew. Peter.
Thank you, I'm here.
Peter, you have to on your video and share your screen.
Okay. Sorry, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Okay. I hope I'm visible now.
Yeah, we can see you and we can see your screen and you're audible.
Okay. Good morning. Once again, my name is Peter Kingsley. I'll be talking to us this morning on IT system security baseline. And without further delay, please, let's just go straight into this. First, we're going to be looking at the vulnerability assessments as an introduction. We'll be looking at mitigation planning, vulnerability scanning. We'll also be looking at hardware and system security, as well as information system security baseline. If you have time, we'll look at the conclusions and take some questions. First, when we talk about vulnerability assessment, we are all used to computers and phones these days. And what is system security baseline? Basically, all of us should be aware as far as we're into the IT world about the need for security in our system. We know about hacking, we know about stealing, defraudment, and what have you. We know about people gaining access into our privacy, especially through technology. So that is why we're talking about what? Vulnerability assessment. Where can you be vulnerable and how does it happen? So we basically talk about vulnerability assessment as a systematic review of security weakness in the information system. It's not just one field. The whole of information system needs to check the systematic review of how weak is our system, how weak is our information system as an organization, as individual. So we talk about the systems. And so we said it evaluates if the system is susceptible to vulnerabilities, assign security level to those vulnerabilities, and recommend remediations or mitigation if and whenever they are needed. Of course, as a programmer, whatever it is or whatever you are dealing with, first, as you are designing your software, basically, you're going to come across, you're going to go through errors, you're going to have issues with your software. But one of the things we need to know is we have to identify whatever it is. We take steps to identify vulnerability identification. We also look at what? Analysis, risk assessment, and remediations. There are 4 stages, and it's what is a continuous stage. The process are always here. The vulnerability identification is a comprehensive step that we take to actually dictate. We can manually or automatically check our system to see why we are working. Basically, this has to do with software first. The vulnerability assessment. You first go into your software while you're coding. We have examples, the NLT, the SAST. The NLT is New Net Technology. It's an app. It's an app that helps you. You can get it free online to actually run a scan on your software during configuration or during coding. The SAST is also another app that you can use. These are free apps that you can use to check or run your code system to see if there are errors, if there are vulnerabilities on your system. Then I put a video link. I think I'll copy it and drop it in the chat box for anybody who wants to just have an idea of how they work. The vulnerability analysis now, when you discover that there's an error in your program or system configuration, while you're configuring your system or when you're running the software and you discover an error, what do? First, you don't just solve the problem by bringing something to handle it. First, you check what is the root cause. The source of that problem should be the next thing in line. I also drop an example of a software that is free that can do it for you. The Nessus Pro is a very good application that you can use to check, to analyze your vulnerabilities, whatever happened in your system. Then we have the risk assessment. This is where you prioritize which of the problem should be handled first while you're configuring your software or while you're configuring your system. One of the things I remember when we were in school is when you have a Trojan antivirus, you're sure then you cannot scan. There's no amount of scanning that can take it off. So what you do first is you leave whatever problem you have, you copy it, look for someone who has maybe a Linux application OS, you drop it there and format your system. Then you can come back with so you don't resolve that. That comes first as a problem once it's in your system, Trojan. So the same thing, when you're assessing your risk, you check, you prioritize them. Which of the risks come first? Which one is very severe according to their severity? Which one should you handle first and the other one? Then the remediations. I always tell people, it's not just solving a problem, but what is the root cause or what happens next? If you solve this particular problem, your next programming, what happens to it? Is there going to be the same thing? If you don't look at the gaps, the loopholes, the challenges that you had during your first configuration, you're going to also have the same thing. So here you look at the best alternative way to actually close those gaps. And then I dropped the video of the new nets. I drop an example of the new net technology here. I say identify known vulnerability within software and configuration settings. We've been talking about software and configuration first. So this is what the new net does for you. We have the static application security testing. This one, actually, can you see, I drop another print screen here. You can see it shows you the number of vulnerabilities over there. Here, it shows us here, this 6, it shows us the number of vulnerabilities here. So we have 6 vulnerabilities. Why this programmer is running his code, either Java, PHP, whatever you are, is actually showing you that, okay, there are 6 vulnerabilities in your coding. And number 3 is actually the most important one. Can you see my video, please? Yeah, the number 3 is actually the most important problem that is asking you to seriously look at while you continue your coding. So this is what the SAST does for us. That is what it helps us to do so that we can actually dictate our problem and solve. Then we talk about mitigation planning. I always tell people, what is the reason for mitigation planning? Mitigation planning is a way of setting your errors at an acceptable stage level. Something, okay, yes, you know there's going to be error, but let's take it to this level where I can actually manage it while I progress in my coding and programming. And I said there is an approach here. From the left hand, you see a diagram there. We have the risk identification. Just like we've said earlier, we have to identify what the error is. We have risk analysis. You analyze the same thing. I have said it earlier. Then we have risk mitigation. This is actually where I want us to actually look at something. The risk mitigation, this is where the best alternative is selected among many other solutions. I said when you are looking at the challenges earlier in the vulnerability system, I said you look at the cause of the problem. So now if you find the cause of the problem, and then we say with remediation, we look at the best alternative way to close the gaps. Now you have several options, positive options, the top-down approach, the hierarchical approach presented to you. So you are going to, from here, this is the stage where you're going to decide which of them is going to make your work easier without stress and then help you. Some people like to program, do their software coding from beginning to a particular stage. Here you might say, okay, let me break it by 10-10. After everything, I go back and check error. Is the mitigation. That is where you take your planning. And then the implementation stage comes in from the moment you make your decision. And how do you know if what you have implemented is active? Is by the feedback you get from people. The feedback will let you know whether the same step we have taken, the best approach that we think is right, is actually working. And then we have risk tracking. I always say it is a continual process. I can say that most computer scientists don't actually remember to scan their system because they will tell you they are very busy, they are this, they are that. But most times you can scan your system as many as you can. You can scan your system to check if there are errors periodically. You don't just wait until there's an issue before you say, okay, let me check my system or let me check. You can always scan your system. And so the same process, you need to keep checking periodically to see if there are errors in your system. So then, sorry, I'm looking at this. So the next one we're looking at is what? The vulnerability scanning. Because I said we can always scan periodically. So I talked about the scanning. Why do you do it? There are 2 processes to this approach. There are 2 approaches to this, the authenticated scanning method and the unauthenticated scanning method. Yes, while you are trying to scan something, you might be working on a particular software or program in an organization, and then you don't give access to people, but yet they have access to your system. They want to check for you. That's the unauthorized access scan system, where the user just start scanning your system without your permission, without you giving permission to him or her, and then have access to your system. While the other method is the authenticated method. This authenticated method is when you actually feel like, okay, there's an issue, you call another hand and say, okay, please help me check this. And so they check for you, and then because you gave access to the person will go into it like it's his own, the software is actually his own, scan and check, and then share the issues or the errors with you. And I have a diagram there from the developing stage, which is the first stage here. From the developing stage here, this stage, there's an issue there. From there, when you check, most times after the development, they just verify, they don't scan. Programmers most times don't take their time to scan software. So what we do is you have to scan, follow this pattern, and it's a continuous process as well. All these processes are continuous process that you don't, how do I put it now? You don't just ignore them and say, okay, because after the first issue, I don't have error. It's a continual process that you have to keep trying. So, sorry, my slides went a bit backward. Okay, so it's a continual process that you have to do after the first stage. Then you scan, you verify. You can actually assign a developer. You can see that's where the issue of authorized person comes in. You assign someone to help you check.
We are no longer seeing your screen.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Sorry, please. How about now?
Yeah, we can see it now.
Oh, okay, thank you. So you actually assign someone to it. That's when we talk about the authorized access. You can see you have to assign someone, a developer, to help you check. And then if there's anything, you fix your error and then you move forward. Then after the whole thing, we've been talking about the software. How about the hardware itself? How about the hardware itself? We have hardware and system security. Now, we're talking about the software. We've been talking about the software all through the vulnerability, everything, the mitigation is all about the software. Now, the hardware itself. And then from here, we say what the hardware security is a vulnerability protection that comes in the form of physical devices rather than software that is installed on the hardware or of a computer system. Here, one thing is I have a diagram also that I have placed. This diagram here, I'm trying to zoom in. You can see power analysis, attack protection, fault injection analysis, attack protection. The work of this, why we talk about the hardware protection, that it is easier for the hardware is because the error rate or the vulnerability rate at the hardware level is minimal compared to the software. Is because we believe that there are power analysis protection, like the power IC, your charger, both your phone and your laptop charger. There are ICs in them. You have your charger that regulates the current from the normal 240 or 210, 110 volts that you have. When you plug in your charger to the light, it regulates the amount of current that is coming into your PC. And then even when you plug it, there's also another thing that is called, you can see something there. There's also from here, there's also another thing that is called IC, power IC. This also help to control the distance. We have the firewall, we have so many of them. The firewall, I talked about the firewall, I talked about what proxy server. These are things for the network. The proxy server helps you reduce. Some of us have to even configure gateway. For some of us that are good, configure proxy like port 8080, just to reduce amount of things coming in our hardware and going out. And I said, hardware system can provide more robust security than software is capable of. And it can also add an additional layer of security for important systems. This is why the hardware is not really talked about as much as the software. But we can also look at it that the hardware is not prone to error, it's also prone to problem and vulnerability. But because there are other tools that we can actually just buy and attach, there are hardwares that we can buy and attach to our system to reduce the vulnerability of our hardware. Then we talked about all these things. We're not talking about what's the information system, generally the information security baseline. This is everything we wanted to talk about. We've talked about the software, we talked about the hardware, but we say baseline security is known as the minimum security control required for safeguarding an organization's overall information system landscape. Either your software, your hardware, as far as an information system is concerned in an organization, you must look at some of these processes. First, the awareness and responsibilities. Second, the baseline assessment, risk assessment, development and implementation. Then we have monitoring and reporting. The awareness and responsibility is the first stage. Every staff of an organization, every member of a particular organization must be aware of how to secure the company, not just their own system, whatever. The company's information and data is very important. And so the organization will drive organization security awareness. We have to inform the members, the staff, about how serious it is to keep confidential CIA of our softwares and data, then assign initial security responsibilities. If I say, okay, you are the man that will be staying at the gate, you must lock the door every time everybody has come in or leave the office. It's your duty. If there are problems, we'll call you. So we'll first assign, the organization assign security to individual, and then in a very minimal way, they will establish information security baseline, undertake a baseline system of security capabilities, conduct a gap analysis between current security and security requirement under the baseline. So all these processes, of course, you have to take what? Information security baseline. You undertake assessment of the whole thing you have put in place. The person you said you should be staying at the gate, is he actually staying? You mounted somebody at the gate. Is everybody just coming in as a light or leaving the office? You have to check from there. Then you put a gap, you check the gap, conduct a gap analysis. Since I put this man at the gate as a head of the organization, has it been effective? Has the process been very effective? Has it reduced the number of people going in and coming out? So you do that. Then the stage 2, you conduct a risk assessment of subject information. Take risk as management decision based on what risk analyzed. Identify the needed resources, internal and external. You can see what we're talking about here. You conduct assessment based on the things we have said earlier. Is it working? Then we'll make decision based on what we have checked. If it is okay, then we'll add more so that we'll safeguard our company from this same process that we have taken. If it is not, we'll look at other method, either within us or external body to come and help. Then we'll say we develop and reverse security policies and processes. You validate and design an organization security architecture. Implement the enterprise-wide security measures. Because as a company, you don't just do things within you. You have to expand. You're going to the world. So we will need more people to put in from the external body to see how we can actually grow as an organization and still be secure as much as we can be. Conduct continuous monitoring and periodic review of security measures. Make regular reporting and documentation. Security feedback and change in corporations. These are the things we need as an information security baseline. Until we look at these stages and implement them, we might be prone to vulnerabilities and attackers, hackers, and what have you as an organization. But any organization who puts all these things into consideration and set them as priority, I bet you we have more security in the organization, and their systems and information will be less prone and will be less vulnerable. So we now talked about what the conclusion. I said IT information security baseline assessment is a systematic review of security weakness in an information system. We say it evaluates if the system is susceptible to any known vulnerability by using different techniques, including mitigation planning process to identify, evaluate, and select options to set risk at acceptable level, given program constraint and objectives. It also uses vulnerability scanning to inspect, that is where we talk about the authorized and unauthorized personnel, to inspect the potential point of exploit on a computer or network to identify security holes, that's the lapses if there are, if the person cannot be. And it can also dictate and classify system weakness in computers, computer network, and communication equipment, and predict the effectiveness of countermeasures. Then I drop some links, the references here, in case you still want to have more information. There are references over there. Then I don't know if there are questions. Please, let's go straight up. Any questions?
Thank you. Thank you, Peter. Is there any question for Peter? We have 2 minutes more. With Peter, for Matthew. Yeah. Any questions? All right. Peter, you can go ahead with your question and ask people your question. I think Victor is talking.
Yeah. Hello.
Hello. Okay.
Victor, there's a noise in your background.
Oh, sorry about Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes, okay.
So the question is, you're talking about software being vulnerable to attacks.
Yeah.
My question is there a way that we can prevent that from happening and there are ways for us that are not like a developer to keep how should I say, be updated on how to scan the system and know if it's attacked.
Okay. First, the software developer, you said if the first question you said is, how do you know if a software is vulnerable? Of course, it's not just the coding alone, but as a programmer, while you're coding and we talked about the vulnerability in the software, it talks about the errors that you make that might not allow your program to run perfectly well is an error. The external hackers can also send something into your program code. Let's say while you're coding and then you're about to upload, or somehow, I talked about the unauthorized access. People who have access to your software, they are not authorized and they don't want it to run, and they just drop a code there. But when you have maybe the NNT, the new net technology, maybe the SAST software in your system that you run, or you have an expert that is in it, because as an organization, I believe, or as an individual, I believe as an organization, you ought to have an expert in system analysis and risk management. So the expert will always check and say, okay, there are errors here. The error is from this, or that has a software that, okay, you could say my system is not running. I remember Mr. Emmanuel was trying to run a particular software with Mr. Hakim last week, Friday. And while they were doing, there were a lot of them. I stayed all through because I wanted to learn some of the things. But let's assume we have this software, the NLT, is just to install and run it through. It will give you where the line of coding had counterpart each other, where there were errors. If at the stage 3, there was an error that he didn't know about and had gone to stage 7. Of course, with that software, it will just quickly tell you, okay, go back to, just like that print screen that I shared that shows 3, it will go back to stage 3. That is where the error is. And that you can actually find it. To protect your system from error. Hello, Mr. Victor. Mr. Victor.
I can hear you.
I said your second question says, you talked about how do you know, right?
I
Or
can't
how
hear you.
can you that is not an expert?
You can hear me.
Your second question, can you hear me?
I can hear you clearly.
Your second question say, as an expert, how, as someone that is not an expert, how do you protect your software from being error prone or being vulnerable? Basically, there are tools you have to, there are always tools. Be too open with your software to unauthorized users, especially there are passwording. You can password your system. You can password your software, whatever it is that belongs to you. That is why there's a need of, don't think because it's your family. You can actually run a password if you are not an expert to avoid so many errors, to avoid people having access to your system. So that alone is the only way out.
All right.
Have password, secure
Peter,
password that you don't share. It will be difficult for people to come in.
Time is up.
So,
thank you very much, everyone, for attending this morning session.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Our presenters, Matthew Monday and Peter Monday. Thank you for coming here. We really enjoyed your presentation. Have a good day, everyone. It's time for Tech Team Stand-ups. All right, it's time for various